Before we begin, I'll just ask for those who are in the room but maybe didn't see Chad, if you're willing to put your first name, maybe share one thing about yourself that most people don't know, and just sharing with our community. So much of this work is about community, so just getting to know our peers and our colleagues and those with whom we join.
Thank you, Rachel. We will start here in just a moment. Thank you for being here. I'm so appreciative that you selected this session to attend, and I know we'll all get a lot out of it. We will be taking questions and comments in the chat. I will be monitoring that, and then if there are appropriate places to ask those, I'll make sure that those get voiced for us. And yeah, I think that's really pretty much it. So I will let Rachel introduce themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna shut a door that I thought I wanted open and I don't. Thank you very much. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Rachel Wixey. It's such a joy to be here, and really a real privilege to be able to have time with you all. And I know some of you, I think I see a couple familiar names from our last session together. But my work in the world is to facilitate meditation for wellness. And I do that work in my wellness center, which is where I am right now, located in Maumee, Ohio. I also do a lot of this work in schools, and I work with both youth and adults. When given the opportunity to choose or influence that direction, I think kids are cool and adults are the messy ones. So I usually start with the adults in schools when I have that opportunity. And I mean that in the very best way. I'm really pointing to myself more than anyone else, actually. And then I also do that in businesses for workplace wellness. And everything that we do in this space is secular in nature. So there's no religion, there's no dogma, there's no doctrine. What we're looking at is based in neuroscience, and specifically what's going on in the brain and the nervous system when we're under stress. And then what resources do we walk with to help us cultivate a little bit more comfort in the body and more ease in the mind, even as we go through hard things. So our time together today, I am going to share a screen, but I want to say right now, we're not going to do a ton of slides or screen time. I am going to share the slide deck. It has key highlights, but the majority of this will be interactive. If anybody would like to or is comfortable turning their camera on, beautiful. If not, it's not necessary. We will have new experiences together, and I will call for reflection. If you feel inclined to share reflection, that's beautiful. And if not, there's no love lost, that's for sure. This is your time intended to be supportive for you. So if I may just share my screen, is that fine by you? You already have me set up to do so. I see that you're ahead. You've been a step ahead of me this whole process, Marlise. Thank you. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, very good. And as this first slide shows, I am representing my work through WorkWell. I do have a wellness center like I named in Maumee. I also have an organization that provides online training specifically related to holistic wellness. And like I said, meditation for wellness is my thing. And the things that we'll be doing here in our time is we'll explore new concepts together. They are based in neuroscience. I promise it won't get too far into science that is boring or dull or hard to understand. I do look to keep it very practical, very tangible, something useful that you can take with you. We're going to have practices together. So secular meditation practices, I promise that those will be short and hopefully supportive. So if I were to ask new people to come in and sit for 10, 20, 30 minutes in silence and it's their first time practicing, then I'd never see you again. And of course, I don't want that. So these will be short practices. Then we'll also have time in reflection, questions. There are resources that I'll share at the end. And again, this is time intended to support you. And I'm excited about it. So thank you. I'm going to go back for just a second. And or at least I might. This is where my very advanced technical skills are going to be displayed. But I am hoping, to the extent that you are willing, that we just can do that for a minute. We're just going to be here together for a little bit. So I'm going to start with a short bit of context and how I got started in my own practice. And okay, keeping an eye on the chat too. So how I got started in my own practice, and it was somewhere around 2008. I was working in a family business. I was married and raising 2 kids. I still am married and supporting 2 adult kids. But my point is, at the time, everything from the outside looking on probably looked pretty well, pretty organized, pretty successful. I was a high producer. It was my family's business. I felt that I needed to be. And so maybe even looked successful by whatever way you may define success. But what was actually going on the inside was a great deal of judgment, anger, worry, judgment, doubt, judgment, fear, if you get the drift. And what I knew was there had to be another way. There had to be another way of being with myself and my own experiences. And there had to be another way of being in relationships. So those up close and personal relationships, like my husband and my father. And then also those passerby relationships, like the lady at the checkout in front of me who's taking too long, and the person driving in front of me. And I knew there had to be another way. So it sent me seeking, and that seeking is a very long part of the story that I'll condense down to something quite short. The seeking led me to a body of work that actually invited me to the cushion, so to speak, once a day, every day. And this body of work didn't explicitly say it's going to teach me meditation. It just invited me to sit down, let my eyes close, into a practice once a day, every day for 365 days. So I sometimes like to say that I didn't look for meditation. Meditation kind of found me. But what I noticed over a short period of time is that it was, in fact, meditation. And then a period of time after that, and I don't know the exact timeline, maybe a couple of months, give or take, I began to notice and recognize the direct correlation between my meditation practice and every area, every aspect, every relationship in my life doing a complete 180. And by 180, I don't mean that people started to do what I wanted them to do or say what I wanted them to say. It was more a matter of how I was relating, how I was joining those relationships, and what my own narratives were, and my own subtle tendencies and my own impulses. These are the things that began to change. And then it was sometime after that that I thought, why didn't I have this in my youth? Why didn't I have these practices as a kid? I did my teenage years a little messy, and college wasn't much different. I finished, I completed, I'm here. But my point is, I kind of thought maybe I should have had these skills sometime sooner than really what I was discovering them. And then I thought, well, maybe there are organizations that teach mindfulness or meditation to K-12 youth, and Northwest Ohio just hasn't caught up yet. And it was at that point that I began the exploration. In fact, there were 2 organizations at that time, many more now, that were doing very skillful training and facilitation of teaching educators and outside providers. I'm considered an outside provider. How to bring this work into schools with youth. And I'm not going to get into my formal studies. That's available somewhere, I'm sure, in the materials that you've all received. But this did kind of start my formal study of what is the efficacy, what's going on, why is it working, what's going on in the brain and nervous system. And from that point on, I've just been this, immersed in this material and the neuroscience that really tells us how resourced we are, the things that we walk with, the things that we have as humans to find more comfort in the body, more ease in the mind, even as we go through difficult things. And those are some of the things that we're going to look at today here in our time. And I think that's probably all for the moment. I want to share on my story in terms of how I got into this work. Does anybody have any questions at this point? I'm loving some of these shares too in chat, by the way. Karina says that she's a very shy person, but loves to sing and act. So I always admire the boldness of some of these things that I'm seeing over here, of acting, singing, dancing, particularly when they're people who name like, I'm not naturally extroverted. It's really good. And our practice supports us in all of these things. Thank you for the shares over here too. All that you do. Yeah, really good. If no questions right now, what I would like to do is move into the definition of meditation that we'll work with for the context of our time. I will see if I can't bring my screen back up here for a moment to do that. And as I do, something that I want to name. There are many types of meditation. This is not the beginning and the end. This is not the best over another kind. Like I named, this is secular in nature. And so this is what we're looking at is what's going on in the brain and the nervous system when we're under stress, and what resources do we have to work with as humans to find more comfort in the body and more ease in the mind. And so we'll work with the definition that was written by Dr. John Kabat-Zinn. And Dr. John Kabat-Zinn was a clinical physician working with pain patients. This was over 30 years ago, and he was finding that the pain patients he was working with, the traditional modalities were not providing the relief that was needed. And so he actually developed what's called mindfulness-based stress reduction as a program, MBSR. Some of you may have heard of that before. He gives a very good secular definition of really what we're doing. And this is what I'll ask for you to focus on as we, join for some of the practices that we'll do together. The definition goes like this: the awareness that comes from paying attention in the present moment on purpose. And here's the kicker: non-judgmentally. The awareness that comes from paying attention in the present moment on purpose, non-judgmentally. So it's almost 11:30 here on this Saturday morning together. And who in our space has judged themselves or someone else at least once today? You may even write it in the chat if you wish. I don't know if I can see the chat from my view, but I'm super curious. No, okay, that's okay. So judgment comes up as an important part of this. I have not. Okay, hats off. Like, listen, that's beautiful. I've been judgy today. Honest share out. I had to encourage a family member not to judge themselves today. So noticing our own judgment, noticing other people's judgment. Yes. Yes. This piece about judgment comes up as an important part of the definition. And I want to crack it open just for a bit, because judgment in and of itself is a stressor. This place in this space where we disconnect in our thinking from others, other humans, through our judgment, puts a stress and a tax and a toll on the nervous system that we're able to endure here and there from time to time, but we're not intended to carry that for long periods of time. Eventually, it puts a stress on the nervous system that we're not intended to carry. So judgment is always this piece that I look in my own personal practice to be aware of when it comes up. It's okay to notice our judgment. The idea is that we don't get carried away by our judgment or become our judgment. And then the other piece that I want to open up on this definition is present moment. And present moment gets a lot of airtime in the space of mindfulness and meditation, certainly. But it gets the airtime that it does because of the weight that it actually carries. The present moment is when we're able to anchor our awareness in the present moment on purpose. It's the only place that our nervous system exists. It's the only place that our nervous system can be at any given time. And so anytime we're thinking too much about the past, it induces depression. Anytime we're thinking or worrying too much about the future, it induces anxiety. And the only place that our nervous system can reconcile is when we are willing to be present with it in the present moment on purpose. And so this is the practice. Our practice is really to say, if any of you were in the last session, Erica made a remark about gratitude, and she stated that she used to hear about gratitude and think, yeah. I mean, I know gratitude is important, and it's, we can all practice gratitude, and that's cool. But to actually be in the practice of gratitude is different. And likewise, to actually bring our attention, anchor our awareness into the present moment. That's also different than being aware of the fact that present moment awareness is a skill. And so each time we practice this secular practice, we are looking to grow in our skill and our ability to anchor our awareness into something that is in the present moment. Any questions about the definition, any reflection about the definition, any thoughts on the definition that we're working with or what's been shared so far? And you may chat or you may speak out. Okay. Yeah. Jenny. Jenny asks, how do you let things go so it doesn't eat away at you and affect work performance? And Jenny, we'll look at a little bit in our time here today at some of the skills that we can build so that our practice begins to support us in being able to notice and observe the things that are triggering us, eating away at us, the things that we're judging, the things that are taking us there, where? Into a stress response. We'll be able to notice those things without being carried away by those things. And I think this is a really good opportunity for me too, to do my first plug for daily practice. Like any other skill we wish to build, we call it practice because as we practice over time, we strengthen certain things in our neural pathways. We become more skilled at the ability to notice when we're in a stress response and then pull a technique out to regulate the nervous system so that we're not carried away by that stress response. And this practice over time does support us in not being completely swept away by these things that are bound to happen in our days. Does that make sense a little bit? Any other questions before we do our first practice together? Yeah. Thank you, Marlise. It is a totally different gig, the things we hear about, but are we actually taking them on as experience in the practice? Thank you for that. Yes. Okay, so I'm going to invite us into our first practice together. We'll have at least 2 experiences, depending on time, maybe more. Anytime I guide a meditation, I start the meditation formally, so you'll know we're beginning. I end the meditation formally, so you'll know that it's ending. I'll invite you to let your eyes close if it feels right. And if it does not, you may simply drop your gaze. This is for your support, your experience, so whatever feels right and comfortable for you. And I will leave a very short period of silence within the practice. This is on purpose. It is anytime we can take an opportunity in silence and in stillness, it can be very nourishing for the nervous system. So we'll give just a little piece of that too. And our first practice will be about 3 minutes. So it's not going to be anything too long or too crazy. Okay. Any questions before we begin? Okay. So to begin, I'll invite you to get into a comfortable position, and if it's available to you, sitting upright yet relaxed. And just even taking that upright posture signals to the nervous system that we're here for practice. So we get this new sense of alertness just by taking a bit of an upright posture. And as we do, we wish to be comfortable, so allowing the shoulders, the neck, the belly, and the legs to relax. And if it feels right for you, allowing the eyes to close. And if not, you may simply drop your gaze to something before you. And you may have your hands on your lap, face up or face down. Mine are face up. It's just a personal preference. And again, if it's available to you, allowing both feet to be flat on the ground. And to begin, inviting your awareness to find your breath. And just discovering the breath as it is right now. We're not looking to change it or manipulate it in any way. Becoming aware of the breath. And inviting attention now to drop to the sit bones. Just feeling the pressure points between the sit bones and whatever seat may be supporting you. And maybe even allowing ourselves to get a bit heavier into the sit bones. And inviting attention to drop one more time to the bottom of the feet. And just feeling any sensation there may be in the bottom of the feet. And if nothing is available there, maybe giving the feet a press into the ground or a twist. Just experiencing sensation in the bottom of the feet. And inviting attention back up to the breath. To close the practice, together we'll follow one natural cycle of the breath, finding the beginning of the in-breath to the end of the in-breath, and the beginning of the out-breath to the end of the out-breath. And as you feel ready, beginning to blink eyes and awareness back into our space. And as we do, detecting the sit bones with eyes open. As we practice attentional awareness with eyes open as well. Thank you for your practice. Any reflection on that short practice? It's about maybe 3.5 to 4 minutes. You may put in chat or unmute if you have any reflection of that experience.
I'm always surprised. I never know if it's how easy it's going to feel or how difficult it's going to feel, anytime I try it. And I don't do a regular practice. So I'm, guessing that might be a little bit different if I were.
So did it feel long?
Mm, it didn't really feel long, but I had a little bit of trouble just sort of really staying like kind of present and grounded. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand who I can't see you. So normally I might ask who relates and just to get a little, hand show on who relates, like staying wear long enough to get that grounding effect, to get that emotion regulation or nervous system regulation effect. Katie shares that it felt short a lot of times in the beginning. If we can start with a short practice, it can feel short and sweet. Sometimes I'm seeing relaxing, and it helps. Jordan shares feel grounded. My mind often feels so busy and noisy. Yes, I know who relates again, Jordan. I'm sure if cameras were on, you would see a lot of hands in the air right now. I must have had a ton of stress. It feels less heavy. Yes, beauty. Jenny shares. Thank you. Try not to feel guilty getting distracted by background noises. Okay, I'm going to speak to that a little bit. So if we were to wait for our environment or our life or our world to be perfect for practice, we would never practice. Right now I have a little more sun kind of coming in a direction. I know that I'm in a commercial building. I have a little HVAC sound I'm noticing. I don't love it. It's not perfect, and so this idea that we shouldn't feel irritated is kind of us being hard on ourselves. And so we can use these things as part of our practice, noticing the HVAC, noticing how I'm relating to the HVAC, noticing that I'm being hard on myself because I feel like I should be able to stay present to the meditation being guided, and I'm not. Really, our practice is just this quality of awareness. And really, the two main things that we're practicing in the context of a very introductory workshop is attentional awareness or self-awareness, and we're practicing skills to self-regulate, the ability to regulate the nervous system to induce some equanimity into our system, some balance into our system. So if we're in a hyper aroused state, that might mean down regulating. If we're in a hypo aroused state, that might mean up regulating. And our practice gives us skills to support us in being able to influence nervous system experience, sensation, health, all of these things. Yeah, Jordan said it can be hard to stay focused in the moment, especially when I'm trying to lead myself through this. Yes. And so today, one of the main things I want us to walk away with, and we have some more material to cover and another practice to have, is that we're actually looking to use whatever is available to us in the present moment in our environment to anchor our attention to. And then, of course, our thoughts wander, and each time we notice they wander, we'll bring it back to the anchor. But Jordan, what I'm experiencing about you, if you don't mind me saying this, I hope not, is that between last session and this session, I know that you're a very sincere student in general. You're in this very active in your growth, very active on your path, and very actively leaning into all of the learning material. It's beautiful. Just to sit and be still, Jenny. I need to take 3 minutes. 3-minute practice is a beautiful start to a practice. Anybody who has adopted a meditation practice over time knows that we're not starting off with 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes. Start once a morning, every morning, 3 to 5 minutes. It's a beautiful way to begin, a very practical way to begin. You will never look back and regret that, by the way. You'll never be 90 years old in a rocking chair looking back going, you know what, those 5 minutes of meditation just weren't worth it. You'll never do it. It is so nourishing and supportive. And we don't have time for today. It's not today's material, but it impacts and supports mental, physical, emotional, social, psychological health and well-being. And there's just so much to be said on that. But Jerry shares, yes, noise canceling headphones are helpful. Absolutely. If that's available to you and you're able to have some of those things to support you in your practice, it certainly does help. My son is a practitioner as well, and I know that's one of his tools as well. Katie has the blessing of her baby in her hand. So there was a little challenge there. We'll talk a little bit about how this actually transfers and affects and impacts. Hello, beauty. Look at this. Anybody looking at your screen right now? We have a baby. Oh, we have a whole family. This is lovely. So thank you. And Katie, I'm going to share something that will absolutely probably be a little bit of a concert psych up for daily practice as it relates to raising babies and working with youth. That's what we're all talking about here too. Our own wellness as educators. And then also, how can my wellness impact the youth with whom I work? Okay, so that's up next. Any other reflection before we move on? Thank you for your shares too. Okay, so I want to take a moment to talk about the prefrontal cortex. Anybody in our space familiar with the prefrontal cortex? I'm going to try and share my screen here again. So the prefrontal cortex is, oops, I'm sorry. I've already done this. That will be in your slide deck. So I'll say this while I'm here and thinking of it. The slide deck that you'll receive from our time together gives you a grounding practice in an audio and video format. And then we're going to talk about the prefrontal cortex for a moment. And the prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain located right up front. It is the very last part of the brain to develop in humans. And our other brain development focuses first on motor skills and the ability to crawl and then walk and put, hand to pick up food and food to mouth and things like that. The prefrontal cortex is actually responsible for decision making, executive function, emotion regulation, and all of the beautiful byproducts of those things. So again, decision making, executive function, emotion regulation, which is really my favorite, the emotion regulation. The fact that we can actually work with emotion regulation on purpose is so cool. But decision making, executive function, emotion regulation, and the byproducts of that, byproducts including things like clarity, the ability to learn, the ability to remember what's been learned and retrieve it, the ability to feel safe in connection with others. All of these things, the prefrontal cortex has a great deal of impact on. And like I said, my very favorite part about the prefrontal cortex is that we are able to work with the prefrontal cortex on purpose through practice. So when the prefrontal cortex is online and intact, we have these executive functions that I've just named working in our favor. And we probably all think that when we head out into the world each day and go about our work, that we've got our prefrontal cortex online intact and emotion regulation, decision making, and so on working on our behalf. If we were to go into a low to mid or mid to high grade stress response, the prefrontal cortex goes offline, our more primitive functions come forward, and the body by design has this remarkable system that puts our body into fight or flight. And I know many of us, or all of us, maybe even have heard of fight, flight, or worst case scenario, freeze. When the body goes into fight, flight, physiologically, what's going on is the blood is, I'm kind of raising my hand across my organs from the belly up, but the blood is leaving the organs, rushing to the extremities, preparing us literally to fight or run. We're getting a chemical rush and release from the brain into the body, cortisol, adrenaline, and the things that we would need if we were truly being in a life-threatening situation. Our vision is actually narrowing down in on our perceived threat. So all of the other rich information that's available to us in our space, in our world, in our environment really kind of goes out of sight. We become unaware because the nervous system is narrowing down on the perceived threat, making sure that we know our proximity to that perceived threat. The problem is, quite often, we as a society are walking around in a low to mid or mid to high grade stress response because maybe I think Jerry looked at me funny on the screen just now, and what's his problem? Like, I don't know who he thinks he is. I'm just here in this conference today, and he signed up and they wanted me to talk about wellness, and I'm here and he's looking at me funny, and what's his problem? And I'm off to the races. Now, Jerry hasn't looked at me funny. He's been a joy, and I love that you've got your screen on, so thank you for that. But the point is, how I'm relating to whatever might be before me is generally what's taking me into that low to mid or mid to high grade stress response. And really what takes me there and what takes Jerry there or anybody else there are usually two very different things. We really can't know what somebody's thinking unless they explicitly name what they are thinking. But I'll give you an example. My husband can walk in the door. He can, at the end of a day, he can say, "Hey, babe, what sounds good for dinner?" And in my mind, I'm thinking, I don't know who you think you are. I work all day too. And if you were that damn hungry, then you should have had lunch. And my mind's off to the races. Same man can walk in the same door of the same house, ask the exact same question to my teenage daughter. Hey, sis, what sounds good for dinner? And she'll say, I don't know, Dad, but when it's ready, call me down. And she'll run upstairs, shut her bedroom door, and not think about the question until somebody calls her down to have the dinner that was prepared. And so this is just a very little example of, number one, we all relate differently, and we can't know how somebody's relating unless they name it explicitly. A lot of times we think we know what people are thinking, or we're good with people, so we think we have a sense of what they might have going on, but really, unless somebody names it explicitly, we cannot. And that we're all relating to different things differently. We don't have time today to talk about childhood and things that influence that, but really just kind of acknowledging that how we relate is really what determines if we are going to be set off into that low to mid or mid to high grade stress response. Thank you very much for my 10 minutes. So any questions right now about the prefrontal cortex? I do see one in here from Jody. How can we help and support students with challenges with executive functioning? Their prefrontal cortex may have endured some trauma. Absolutely. So here's what I want to say also about the PFC. It is also not fully developed in humans until our mid-20s. In the beginning, they thought that it was the late teens that this was fully developed. Then they thought it was the early 20s that this was fully developed. Then they found now that this is not fully developed in humans until our mid-20s, which means that our youth have to borrow on the nervous system of the adults they spend the most time with in order to regulate. In the home, that's 1 to 3 people. And in schools, it's you find people. And so sometimes trauma, and sometimes not even explicit trauma, can make it very hard for them to be online, right? They need the nervous, they don't just need adults to spend time with, they need regulated adults to spend time with. And one of the very best things, Jody, I want to answer the question directly. One of the very best things that we can do is us ourselves embody a regulated nervous system that they can borrow on. This is not a fake it till you make it, because there's a lot of biofeedback that our body is giving when we are actually truly in a regulated nervous system. Skeletal muscles around the eyes are affected. The prosody in our voice is affected. Our heart rate and our breathing and our respiratory is affected. So many things. And kids are sensing, feeling creatures first, right? We're verbal much later. In fact, if we're trying to act like we're cool, but we're dysregulated inside, that sends mixed messages. And we build our trust actually by having that embodied regulated nervous system, being fully present to the youth with whom we spend time, letting them feel and experience that embodiment from us, so that they themselves can then begin to have a felt sense of safety in their own nervous system. I hope this makes sense, but it is one more time and an encouragement and a call back to consider our own daily practice. Again, once a day, every day for 5 minutes. And each time we practice on a daily basis, we are actually building new neural pathways in the brain, that if we practice in the morning when the sky's not falling, as we go out into the world and do big things or do our thing, we are able to find that regulated space more quickly on purpose when we want to. Does that make sense? I am keeping an eye on our time here. Any questions, or Jody, any follow-up question on that? A short version of the answer is I do invite each of us to consider daily practice for our own personal health and well-being, and then for those with whom we join. This is not just kids, because not only do kids borrow on our nervous system, but as adults, we are co-regulating at all times. You ever been with somebody that just feels good to be with? Possibly an embodied regulated nervous system is in play, maybe likely even. Have you ever been with somebody that you don't really have any true problem with, but you spend an hour and you leave and you need a shower and a nap? You feel like, what just happened? Like, oh my goodness, what just happened? And that dysregulation, to spend a lot of time with somebody who is either in a hyper state or even a hypo state, can actually be draining on the co-regulating effects of two humans together, of joining. Any questions about that or reflection? Facilitate meditation for a living, so I can wait it out pretty good. Okay. If we don't have any questions in general about the material we've covered today, you may take
Do you have
yeah.
do you have any recommended resources for learning more about the prefrontal cortex and how to kind of interact with that with students?
Yeah, so I will share a resource link with you. It is in its early stages. It does have guided meditations, it has research, it has some of the things that we're talking about here right now, and it is continually building each week. And this is a very important topic for the work that I do with educators, of course. So I will share that. That will be in your slide deck as well, and there's a QR code that you can go to for that as well. Jerry, beautiful. I love this. Listen, I know I've said that the practice is secular in nature when I join with schools, but my personal practice is absolutely steeped in my spiritual practice. It's steeped in prayer as well. So it's beautiful that it kind of naturally leads that way. Thank you for that share. Jenny, how can you help shift negative energy? Here's my first tip. Our ability to, again, attentional awareness, notice when the energy is slipping, and then for us ourselves to do something to bring that prefrontal cortex online. So I want to make this direct tie between each time we are practicing attentional awareness, we're engaging the PFC. And each time we engage the PFC, the prefrontal cortex, we're engaging emotion regulation, thus lifting the energy of ourselves. And therefore, this is what we are coming into the mix contributing from. And this is really all that's upon us. It's not upon me to make sure Marlise has a good attitude or to make sure Jerry's behaving himself or anything else. Really, this work is to kind of stay in our own lane and make sure that we uplift ourselves through these practices in a skillful way. And then our contributions to all that we do next will be uplifted as well. So awareness and self-regulation, those two main things would be my short answer. Any other questions before we close our time? I'll do a 60-second practice to close our time here today. And then, of course, the card deck. The slide deck is, I'm going to put it in here right now so that I know I've done it. And this has two practices. It has more information on the PFC, some of which we've talked about. Some we have not. Thank you. Did you do that, Marlise? Okay. Oh, I didn't share it with everyone. Forgive me. I'm going to try again. I know where I'm skilled and I know where I'm not, y'all. Okay, here we go. So that's the link for everybody that can access the card deck. And if there are no other questions, we'll close with a 60-minute practice or 60-second practice if we have that time. Good? Thank you. Okay, so just again, getting into a comfortable position, sitting upright yet relaxed if that feels supportive, allowing the eyes to close. And finding the breath. And as we do, maybe just counting the in-breath, counting the out-breath. We're not really changing or manipulating it. Just being present to it. Anchoring our awareness to it. And for the next cycle of the breath, maybe adding one count to the out-breath. And allowing the breath to return to its natural rhythm. To close our time and to close our practice, bringing in the quality of gratitude for the rich resources we walk with, and for anything else you may name in your own mind. And beginning to bring awareness back into our space and movement into the body, wiggling toes, rolling wrists as you move what wants to move and stretch what wants to stretch. I'm so grateful for all of your work in the world. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for your time here in our session here today. And thank you so much for your practice.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to Rachel and thank you to Erica who presented in this room earlier. So we do have a brief closing. So if everyone will leave this meeting and return to the main room where you started, we will have a closing, and then there's also an opportunity for evaluation, and that's also how you can request like a certificate of participation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marlies.